This periodization is today treated as fact in Hindu nationalist ideologies. Today, historians of the centuries preceding the British period reject the earlier characterizations of the period of the Muslim dynasties. They also argue, perhaps surprisingly, in relation to the 18th century, that it was the culmination of long-term transitions in trade, finance, culture, and society that offered the English the very resources they needed to exercise their own remarkable innovations in finance, organization, and military and naval technology. This chapter introduces the middle frame of the triptych, covering roughly 1206 to 1707, when patterns were set that help explain our traveller's view both back in time and ahead. The Delhi Sultanate. The common image of India's past has been profoundly influenced by two interrelated misperceptions. One, that the classical texts of the Brahmins described an existing society, and second, that because India was timeless, the village and caste organization of colonial or even contemporary India was a guide to its historical past. In fact, the periods of the Sultanate and Mughal rule accelerated already existing patterns of change. These centuries saw the expansion of the agricultural frontier, extensive commercial networks, gradual technological change, and development of political and religious institutions. These changes, not some stagnant society, formed the prelude to the colonial era. Nor, one might add, did Muslim rulers fit the caricature assigned them. It is, for instance, misleading to speak of them as foreign, for, in patterns set by the earliest sultanates, Muslim and non-Muslim polities and cultures changed in interaction with each other. It is also misleading to speak of this era as the period of Muslim rule. Such an expression exaggerates the differences between states ruled by Muslims and those ruled by non-Muslims. It also obscures the participation of non-Muslims in the Muslim-led polities. It may further suggest that there were religious practices, like mass conversion, that did not exist. Successive Turco-Afghan regimes, collectively known as the Delhi Sultanate, dominated political life in the north, with periodic incursions into the south, during the late 13th and 14th centuries. These Turks and Afghans, like invaders before them stretching back 2 millennia, originally entered the subcontinent through the mountain passages of the northwest. One immediate corrective to much scholarship is to emphasize how much their kingdom had in common with other Indic polities of the day. Like these other states, including that of the celebrated Rajput Prithviraj Chauhan, the Turks and Afghans sought, above all, military successes in order to secure access to the agricultural surplus of the countryside. Like them, they possessed a fragmented political authority, with rights to a share of the land revenue of a specific area assigned to their subordinates as a form of compensation. Also like them, the Delhi Sultans offered scope to individual achievement, above all through military prowess. Any periodization predicated simply on the religion of the rulers would miss such fundamental similarities. The Turks and Afghans were invaders, but they behaved in ways that were familiar to their enemies. The Turks, as these rulers were conventionally called, were assimilated to such familiar categories as Yavan, Ionian, the term used to describe the Greek invaders who followed Alexander the Great a millennium before, or Mlech, barbarians, a term for those outside the area of settled Indic civilization, whether from distant areas or nearby jungles. The core military and economic institutions of these dynasties were thus not specifically Islamic. The sultans themselves were not religious leaders. Like non-Muslim rulers, they did not gain their authority through their own holiness or sacred learning, but through their military and governing skill. They were expected, however, to patronize those who were holy and learned. The historian Peter Hardy has called the sultans pious policemen, collaborating with pious lawyers. Muslim rulers patronized not only the learned legal scholars, or ulama, who had mastered the sacred Arabic texts, but also the moral guides and spiritual intermediaries, the Sufi sheikhs. These two bodies of specialists had emerged as the foci of community life among Muslims from the 11th century on. Non-Muslim rulers, whether warrior rajas or lesser lords, in similar fashion patronized Brahmins. The Brahmins both cultivated ritual and legal learning, as recorded in the sacred Sanskrit text.